The year is 1973, and a mother in Seattle is the happiest she has ever been. Her son just got into Harvard. Not as a legacy admit, not because anyone made a call because he earned it, which is the version of success that doesn't require any explanation at dinner parties. Mary Gates has spent 20 years building a path for this boy. Board seats, charity galas, slow burn friendships with the kind of men who run the kind of companies that define what winning looks like in America. And the path worked. Her son is going to Harvard. He is going to become a lawyer or an executive. He is going to be exceptional in the way she planned. What she doesn't know, what she can't see from where she's standing, is that the path is already on fire, and the one who lit it is her son. Mary Maxwell Gates is not a background character in this story. She is the architect, and you cannot understand what's about to happen without understanding her first. She is brilliant, organized, and relentless, in the specific way that women in 1950s America had to be relentless, which is to say, sideways. She couldn't run the company, so she sat on its board. She couldn't hold the office, so she cultivated the people who did. United Way, University of Washington, Board of Regents, charity dinners with IBM executives. She built 30 years of social capital with the patience of someone who understands that the right relationship at the right moment is worth more than any credential. And she poured all of it into one project, her son. Not out of control, out of love. A mother's love that said, "The world is hard, and I am going to make sure you have every advantage it takes to survive it." The problem is that Bill is something else entirely. At 13, he's writing real code payroll software for businesses, scheduling systems for his own school on a computer terminal that most adults in 1968 have never seen. He argues with teachers, corrects them mid-sentence, stays up until 3 in the morning because the problem isn't solved yet, and the unsolved problem is the only thing in the room worth his attention. He has a temper that fills rooms and a mind that empties them. Mary sees all of it, and what she feels isn't just pride, it's a specific anxiety that only certain parents know. The anxiety of watching a child who is too fast, too resistant, too sharp for the normal friction that shapes people into something the world can use. She's seen what happens to boys like that when nobody keeps them in check, so she pushes back. Every dinner table becomes a debate. Every claim has to be defended. She sharpens him the way a blade sharpens a blade through friction, through pressure, through love that sometimes looks like opposition. What she never accounts for is the day she becomes the thing he needs to push against. Harvard, 1973. Bill's body is in Cambridge. His mind is somewhere that hasn't been named yet. He sits in graduate math courses as a freshman and outperforms the PhD students. He plays poker until sunrise. He sleeps through the classes that bore him, which is most of them. His professors don't know whether to be impressed or alarmed, so they are both. Then, in December 1974, he sees it in a magazine. Popular Electronics. On the cover, the Altair 8800, the first personal computer kit anyone can actually buy. He calls Paul Allen his childhood coding partner, and the certainty in his voice is something Allen has never heard before. Not excitement, certainty. If we don't move right now, someone else will, and it'll be over before it starts. They write a letter to the company making the Altair, claiming they have working software for the machine. They don't. They build it in 8 weeks of near continuous work, and when Bill flies to Albuquerque to demo it on a real Altair for the first time, the moment the machine responds correctly, he exhales like a man who has been holding his breath for years. Microsoft is born. 1 hyphen, 2 20-year-olds, 0 business plan. Back in Seattle, Mary reads her son's letters and smiles certain, the way only a mother can be certain, of something she needs to believe, that this is a phase. A brilliant detour before he comes back and finishes the degree. She doesn't know he's already in every way that matters, gone. 1975. Bill is home for a visit. The lakefront house, the family dinner, the water outside the window, doing what it always does. He tells them he's leaving Harvard. moving to Albuquerque full time. He and Paul are building a software company. Mary speaks before his father does. You're going to throw away Harvard to sell software to hobbyists? Not cruel, completely rational. In 1975, nobody, not IBM, not any serious analyst, believes personal computers are anything other than a hobby. She's asking what any loving parent would ask. But underneath the question about Harvard is another question she doesn't have language for yet. What happens to you if this fails? Who catches you out there? Who knows you the way I know you? Bill explains the timing, the market, the window that's open right now and won't stay open. He talks in the language of inevitability, the way people talk when the decision is already made and the conversation is just paperwork. And Mary listens. The way parents listen when they're not really listening, when what they're doing is feeling. What she feels is something that has no clean name, but that every parent who has ever built something for a child knows. I made the path. I made the version of the future where you're safe in it. And you're standing here telling me the path goes somewhere I didn't plan. What Bill doesn't say out loud, I'm more afraid of standing still than I am of falling. But I'm terrified too. They don't have that conversation. Not in 1975. So they have the other one about Harvard and responsibility, and it ends without resolution. And Bill goes back to Albuquerque, and Mary adds it to the drawer of things she is waiting to be proven right about. Albuquerque, a small office above a bank. Bill is 20 years old and sleeps on the floor not as mythology, just because there aren't enough hours to drive home and back, and the code doesn't stop needing to be written because the sun went down. The company grows. Bill's intensity, the same quality that made him impossible in classrooms, turns out to be exactly what the tech business selects for. He doesn't want to compete. He wants to make competition structurally irrelevant. But on the other side of the ledger, invisible to the revenue numbers, something else is happening. The friendships thin. The relationships that require him to be present, patient, curious about another person's inner life, those don't survive the schedule. He calls his parents. The conversations are short, progress reports, not connection. Mary asks how he's eating. He pivots to a new contract. She keeps every letter he writes in a drawer he doesn't know exists. In 1979, Microsoft moves to Bellevue, Washington, closer to home. Mary gets more involved, the way Mary Gates gets involved, using decades of social capital, so naturally it doesn't look like strategy, because for her, it isn't. She introduces Bill to the right people at the right dinners, and for a window, they're speaking the same language again: ambition, achievement, the specific pleasure of watching something you built exceed what you imagined. Neither of them names the repair. They just notice it isn't broken anymore. But something is coming that neither sees. Something that will put everything the company, the relationship, the unspoken agreement between them under the kind of pressure that shows what things are made of. 1980. IBM wants to build a personal computer. They need an operating system. They call Microsoft a company with a basic interpreter, a handful of contracts, and a 24-year-old CEO who has never operated at this scale. Bill tells them yes, he can deliver. He does not have an operating system. What he does next is either the most audacious bluff in American business history or the clearest expression of what separates empire builders from everyone else. He finds a programmer named Tim Patterson who has built a rudimentary system called QDOS. He pays $50,000 for it, licenses it to IBM, and quietly, in contract language IBM's lawyers don't flag, he retains the right to license it to any other manufacturer. IBM ships the PC. Every clone manufacturer needs the same OS. They all come to Microsoft. The company that didn't build the underlying technology collects a licensing fee every single time. It is the decision that makes Bill Gates worth hundreds of billions. It is also the decision that follows him as a moral question for the rest of his career, the ghost in every antitrust hearing, every competitor lawsuit, every argument that Microsoft's monopoly was built on extraordinary opportunism dressed as innovation. But here's what almost nobody includes in that story. Mary Gates made the meeting possible. Her relationship with John Opel, IBM's chairman, her fellow board member at United Way, is what opened the door. When IBM was vetting this small Seattle software company, Opel vouched for the Gates family personally. Without that call, a 24-year-old with no track record at this scale doesn't get a second meeting. He gets a polite rejection. Mary never claimed credit. She made the introduction the way she made everything, as part of 30 years of relationships she'd built without a ledger, without a transaction in mind. The son who she told to stay at Harvard took every ounce of her social capital and converted it into the deal of the century. She built the key. He found the lock. Neither of them ever said that to each other directly. 1986. Microsoft goes public. Bill Gates becomes a billionaire at 30. Mary watches proud, genuinely proud, and then watches the other things. She watches him become famous for screaming at employees, for telling engineers their work is the stupidest thing he's ever seen, for running people until they break and then hiring more who can take it. The stories filter back through the business press, through family dinners, through the Seattle world she still moves through. She watches him not date, not rest, not have friendships that don't eventually circle back to information and strategy. She starts writing longer letters, not about business, about Melinda French, the woman appearing in Bill's life, who Mary meets and immediately loves, about what it means to build something that outlasts you, about whether you can spend a whole life acquiring without stopping to ask what the acquiring is for. You can lose yourself in this, she tells him once, and then who's left? He reads the letters. There's always something more urgent. The urgent things always have deadlines. Her letters don't. So they go into the pile of things he'll return to when there's time, and there's never time, because he has built himself into a system without an off switch. The cycle she tried to warn him about from the outside. Success creates a hunger that more success can't satisfy. The emptiness grows proportionally with the achievement surrounding it. The only answer the machine knows is more. Then, in 1993, Mary is diagnosed with breast cancer. And everything the meetings, the deals, the depositions, the empire suddenly exists at a different scale. Bill Gates marries Melinda French on January 1st, 1994, on a golf course in Hawaii. He charters every helicopter on the island so no photographer can get an aerial shot. Characteristically, the most controlled wedding in history. Mary cannot attend. The cancer is too advanced. She is in Seattle in the late stage of an illness that has taken most of what it intends to take, and she is not going to be in the seat she should be in on her son's wedding day. But she writes a letter, and it is read aloud at the ceremony. In it, she tells Melinda, "From those to whom much is given, much is expected." That sentence from the Gospel of Luke, carried in Mary's voice across an ocean to a wedding she couldn't attend, becomes the foundational philosophy of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the North Star of an organization that will move more than $80 billion toward vaccines, toward global health, toward education systems in communities that markets had abandoned. The largest charitable organization in human history is built on a line a dying woman wrote from her sickbed. The woman who fought against the dropout, whose disapproval he felt for years, whose definition of success he spent a decade trying to escape. She ends up writing the mission statement of the entire second half of his life. Mary Maxwell Gates dies in June 1994. 6 months after the wedding, she couldn't attend. Bill is by her side. He doesn't give interviews. He goes quiet in a way no one around him has ever seen, not the silence before the next move, but the silence that happens when the person whose voice you've been arguing with your whole life is suddenly, permanently gone. The conversation is over, and everything he still wanted to say has nowhere to go. Here's the strange thing about Bill Gates dropping out of Harvard. He never really left. In 2007, Harvard awarded him an honorary degree. He stood at the podium 32 years later, one of the wealthiest people on earth, running a foundation already reshaping global health, and said, "I've been waiting more than 30 years to say this. Dad, I always told you I'd come back and get my degree." His father was in the front row, 81 years old, crying. His mother was not there. And that's the irony that runs deeper than a joke about a diploma. Mary Gates spent her life building credentials, contacts, a specific and lovingly constructed path. Bill spent the first decade of his career rejecting every brick of it. And then, without making a ceremony of it, he became everything she wanted, not through the path she planned, but through a longer route that she helped build, without knowing she was building it. The foundation carries her line. Her network made the IBM deal. Her social capital became his first real lever. The dropout built the degree she wanted. The son who escaped the cage built a bigger one and called it philanthropy. She won. Just not in the way either of them imagined. You just watched a story about a software company. But that's not what you watched. You watched a son try to outrun his mother's definition of him. You watched a mother try to protect a child from the very qualities that made him extraordinary. You watched two people who loved each other speak completely different languages for 20 years, find the translation only at the end, and then run out of time before the conversation could finish. And some part of you recognized it because you've lived some version of it. Maybe you took the path that was built for you and still wonder what you might have become if you hadn't. Maybe you broke the path and you're still waiting across years, across silence, across charged dinner tables for the person you broke it on to understand why. Maybe you are the one watching someone you love move towards something you can't follow them into, and the love and the fear have gotten so tangled you can't tell which is driving. Every generation thinks they invented this fight. They didn't. It's older than Harvard, older than ambition itself. The cycle doesn't end, it just changes hands. And the people who shaped how you first heard the question, who do you want to be, they echo in the room long after they're gone. That's not tragedy. That's what it means to have been loved.